Yes. Do we need to call ours?
I don't know. Do I just text him and say, are you gonna be able to make it?
Good. Thank you.
Because he's not in having lunch breakfast, right?
Hey, Mr. Springmeyer, how are you?
He said, he messages the group and said he's on his way.
Oh, he did? Okay, I'm on the wrong phone then. Okay, Lars is on his way.
He's on his way. I got one thing, that a letter came yesterday in the mail.
Okay,
It's open, can I just bring that up? John gets me.
Oh, I know. I don't have any.
I can share it with them.
How's our sound, Ken?
I'll send it out after. I just
Okay.
got it.
okay.
Sound check. Ken?
Are you wanting Ken to respond?
Yes, can you hear me? Oh, yeah, can you hear me okay? Yes. How about now? Yep. We're having some
Oh, were you having issues with the,
with the mic on that side, but.
all the way
I think we're
around,
good.
Mike?
Yep. Thanks, Ken. Yeah. Grab the rest of.
No, I'm coming to move all my.
Yeah. My version, unfortunately.
Well, you know, I just filled some old bottles with what I have.
It's the way things go, right? Yeah.
There's a good guy. Could be all right.
I'll turn the time over to Mr. Evans.
Just real quick, before we get into everything else. With Jim, we received a letter yesterday from the state of Utah Department of Veteran and Military Affairs. The letter is stating that they are looking at constructing a new veterans home at the driving range on the old UDOT driving range on 4727. According to this, it's 125,000 square foot, 105 bed facility for veterans. This is, as they go on, here again, this just came, they want to have a facility to serve Salt Lake, Tooele, and Juab counties out of there. I forwarded this, I'll forward this to you, but wanted to give you a heads up that yesterday we received this, so. I don't think they're asking.
Asking permission.
Right.
It's a notification.
I'll turn that over to somebody else. I think it was just nice to send a letter. And it doesn't say when they're planning, but it is at the driving range, the UDOT driving range on 47.
So we don't look at selling that property.
You don't
Well, we don't own it.
Stay to
We don't
yourself.
know. We don't look at-
So,
Anybody for.
but that's where we're at.
Putting anything on it.
Was,
Okay.
I was going to mention that, I've had that, and I'm jumping ahead, but I've had that request or plea or whatever about veterans housing in the city, and I had a discussion with Wayne last year, and he had brought this up. He had just preliminary information about it, but he said it was a possibility, so. And he gave some other alternatives that I'd like to throw past the council, but sounds like this would be a good fit for that objective.
Yeah, they, pretty big, 125,000 square feet,
Yeah, it is.
They said 105 units.
105 beds.
And they'll probably have some support
Yeah, I would
stuff
imagine.
there as well.
I would imagine it would.
So,
So I'll pass this along.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a good location. It's near stores and public transportation, so I think it's a good spot for it. Okay. We'll now turn the time over to Mr. Welch and he'll give us a full financial slew of information.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been dealing with a few technical difficulties this morning. My computer decided to update its BIOS and then do Windows and everything else. So if you'll give me just a moment, I'll have this up. I apologize for the delay. One of these things worked perfectly in my office. And when you need it, it didn't quite do it for me. Okay. Share my screen. I'll go into the presentation and then we will proceed. Thank you for the time this morning. The six. Oh, yours doesn't show all the stuff that's on my screen. That's a lot better because mine's messy. As Mayor mentioned, I'm Jim Welch. I'm the finance director for the city. And I'd like to present to you an overview of where the city is for the budget this year, and then open up for whatever discussion or questions you might have. This is fairly typical of what we've done for each strategic planning retreat. To begin with, we have an overview of kind of the economic environment that we're currently sitting in. Right now, the economy has been kind of in a holding mode. We've been expecting a slowdown in most of the major economic indicators for the last year or so, but it seems like it seems to be a juggernaut. Our sales tax is remaining relatively flat. We haven't seen any real declines in it. Utah's economy tends to hold very better than the rest of the nation. Our unemployment rate is the best in the nation, if not in the top 3, depending on which month you look at. Our property tax, which is approximately a third of our revenue, remains flat due to the truth in taxation laws. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. And then we do have ongoing challenges of maintaining a qualified and effective workforce. With that, the next there we go. This is what our budget looks like. We bring in the majority of our revenues from sales taxes, which has been very healthy the last couple of years. We benefit from a couple of things. One thing is very strong and robust economic development within the city. We have a lot of retail and we have a lot of businesses that generate sales tax. Another thing in the last couple of years that's really benefited us that isn't paid a lot of attention to is the effect of inflation, where we've had significant inflation in the cost of goods and services that are taxable. That's also increased our sales tax. So on one end, that's a challenging thing to deal with. It increased our costs, increased our cost of labor, our cost of materials, but the other side, it also increases our revenue. We're expecting this year, the sales tax projections are going to be relatively flat with this last year. And the latest distributions we've received from the state indicate that we're really about where we were last year without a whole lot of increase, just so we know what's going on there. Property tax is driven by by state law is intended to remain flat with the exception of the increase in new growth. And new growth is defined as new construction. So just because the value of a property goes up does not mean that they're going to pay more property tax so that we're going to collect more property tax. The rates are actually adjusted down as values go up. And if I was to show you the rates, you'd see that that has been the trend the last couple of years. Revenue does go up with new construction though. So if you see a new business come in and they do improvements or they build a new office building or something like that, that becomes new taxable revenue to the city. We have the rest of them are made up by fees and other taxes that we have on utilities. Occasionally I get telephone calls from people about this and I'm happy to explain them over the telephone, and just that's a regular course of our business, is helping people understand how the city funds their services. As we go through this, I'd be happy to take any questions I don't want to go through it too quickly. Yes, Will.
I had a question on the sales tax. Do you have, you know it off the top of your head or have it reported somewhere, but our top sales tax contributors?
Absolutely. Yeah, we do. The top sales tax contributors are actually protected information. We're not allowed to provide the individual information to the public. And there are some fairly severe penalties if we did. We're barred from public office or holding a public position for at least 3 years, and it's a misdemeanor, as I remember. Also, they could withhold the money from the from the city if we were to disclose that. So that out of the way. We do know exactly who they are. I get a monthly distribution list that says who they are. We can disclose them by sector. As you know, our big box businesses do very, very well, and they contribute the majority of our sales tax. Some other operations that are big contributors are things like car dealerships, also things like mining, which we have several types of mining operations. Then we have truck sales. We have heavy equipment, which is a huge contributor, and those are probably the biggest ones.
That's kind of
good question. Yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
Jim. What's the percent change in property tax from growth?
The percent change in property tax from growth is usually less than 2%. We have one thing that's going on within the city that is kind of hard to quantify. We have a number of RDA areas. That's not included in this revenue. So if you see a building that goes up in an RDA area, it goes to the redevelopment agency. Over time, the amount of money that goes to that redevelopment agency, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more detail later on, is reduced depending on how old the project is. And that money starts to come back to the city and the other taxing entities. At the conclusion of the project, then whatever the residual remaining value comes in. So a couple of different things. Maybe that's more information than you needed, but yeah, that's about where it is. Okay.
Jim, sorry,
Yes, sir.
go back to the slide.
Absolutely.
What are reserves as far as, that's not revenue, that's just our reserves?
Correct. Those are reserves that we have budgeted to cover one-time expenses or actually to balance the budget. So if there are things that we need to do that the city council or whoever's, when you've approved the budget, we need to use a certain amount of reserves to pay for, could be anything. That's
Fund
what that
balance?
is. That's fund balance. Yeah, that's a good definition.
So I don't know, do we want that shown as revenues?
This is because you have a balanced budget, we have to have a revenue balanced with expenditures, so the numbers are the same. That's the plug number, basically, one way to look at it. So it usually by the end of the year isn't that number. That's the initial budget, what we expect to spend. By the end of the year, we may collect, because these are projections, we may collect more revenue, we may collect less, and that will cause that number to fluctuate based on our expenditures. Good question.
So is this the average amount we take out of the fund balance every year to balance?
No, that fluctuates quite a bit. And it depends on the priorities of the city. So for example, this 3.6, a good portion of that is for fleet, which we've talked about many times in city council. Fleet purchases are usually budgeted out of reserves. It also may include money that's been held aside for future debt service. In other words, a debt payment that comes up. There's a bunch of different things that can go into this. So like I mentioned before, it's kind of plug is a bad word for it, but it's the way to say that these are the one-time monies that have been set aside for other things, that amount will probably change by the time we have our audit done at the end of the year, because the net is going to be different than what we originally projected. The expenditures won't, because every dollar has to be projected, but the revenues may change, and we may actually underspend the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Sure, that's fine.
Is this projected, our sales tax number, the 42 million, is that projected or is that last year?
This is projected 2024.
So if it comes in less, then we're,
If it comes in less and everything else were held static, then we would end up spending more reserves. But that's everything held static. There's a whole lot of things that go into that pot. So that's a very good point. We're actually trending above that number right now in sales tax. I expect to be slightly ahead of that, maybe $500,000 or so. I'm sorry, maybe, well, at least $500,000. It changes kind of on a monthly basis. I track this and I project it forward, but the collections vary widely. I got the November's tax distribution last month. They actually pay it to us 2 months after it occurs. And then I got December's just a couple of days ago. November, we were quite a bit above what our projections were. December, we were significantly below, but over time they start to even out. And it looks like the general trend is we'll be pretty close to this, if not slightly over.
John. Miscellaneous is how many items in this group?
In which one?
The miscellaneous?
Miscellaneous. Off the top of my head, I don't have the number of items on there, but that would be things like forfeited assets that come in. It might be things where people are paying fines that have been overdue. It might be the sale of a piece of property, things like that. There's a number of different items that come in through miscellaneous. It also covers, in this particular slide, it covers the transfers from other entities. For example, internal entities. For example, we may receive money from the Maverick Center to help pay for their debt service. We make a transfer to the Maverick Center, they transfer back a certain amount to pay the debt service, that shows up in miscellaneous.
So probably a lot more in there.
Yeah, there's a number in there. And I certainly have the detail. I just don't have it in this overarching slide. Okay. All right, this is kind of the detail of what our property tax collections have looked like for the last few years. Our projections mirror our budget. We don't have an awful lot of control over those, and it has nothing to do with market forces. Every June, we get a certified tax rate from the county, actually from the state, where they say, okay, this is how much money based on new growth calculation from the submissions of building permits and things like that, how much you're going to collect this next year, and we plug that into the budget. We do a projection right now, so we're in the process of building the 2025 budget based on these trends, and they're usually pretty close, but very honestly, I don't know exactly what they're going to give us until we hit mid-June. We're by law expected to adopt a tentative budget or an operating budget that we can operate on until the final budget's adopted in May. So we have to make those projections earlier, and just hopefully they're pretty good. Sometimes they're a little bit off. That's also something that is off, can be covered with the fund balance or other revenues, should there be a change in that projection. So as I said, this is only driven by new growth, not valuation. So as you have citizens come up and ask you about the how come my property tax has changed? I haven't done anything to it. Well, there's a lot of different reasons. It could be another entity's increased their property tax rates. It could be the school district. It could be the mosquito abatement district, or whoever. But overall, when you take the whole pool of property taxpayers, it doesn't change for them unless there's an actual rate increase and truth in taxation taken by one of the tax entities.
So up in the right-hand corner, you've got the budget and the projected are gonna be the 34,918. But then in this chart, you have for 24, 40,000. So the difference,
Yeah, that the chart is total property tax collections, which also includes the road tax. And because that's dedicated to C roads and we can't use it for general fund expenditures, I just didn't break that out, and I could have certainly done that. Otherwise, the projection would have equaled the 34.
so this isn't property tax then?
I'm
This-
sorry.
The chart. The
That-
chart is not only property tax. You've got another line item in there. Is that what you're saying? You put like the CB,
Let me make sure I got this right here.
the C whatever road funds? Yeah, because you do have.
Yeah, good catch. I will have to look into that for you, Mayor. Because yeah, the budget should be the 34.9, and that should be our projection in 2024. And the 30, this appears to be that the data has been, there's something in there that does not belong.
Okay. You'll let us know later?
I can certainly do. I'll tell you what, I'll update the chart and send it to you.
Okay.
If, as a matter of fact, it looks like there was if you'll look at the looks like the data for the property tax chart was mixed up with the data of the sales tax chart. So I can get that fixed for you.
Oh, they are the same. Okay.
Yeah. My sincerest apologies. That's, as I said, I was experiencing some technical difficulties on that one. So the philosophy on the property tax is the same, and I do have detailed charts that I can show you later if we decide to get into that. This is the sales tax. That's labeled properly. You asked about the 2024 budget. We budgeted 39,077,000, and right now we're projecting about 40 for 2024. And then our projections are coming in a little bit lower in some cases than what we had before. I use long-term annual projections to come up with a trend on how to project the following year. And then I take into account changes in the economy. And so in the 2025 year, we're expecting about 39.7. That could change by the time we adopt the final budget, but that's our preliminary guess.
So another difference.
Yes.
So on the budget revenue, you have 42,392 is what the budget is. And on here, you have the projected's only going to be 40,000. So, I mean, 40 million.
This one,
Dollars
$2.5
different
million is the road tax.
that is on our original chart for,
Correct.
so in the future, can we separate those? So,
Yeah, or else I can just take it entirely off if you'd like me to do that.
well, it's a revenue source, just needs to be its own little.
Yeah, that's, I can just put another little bar in there that says this is much goes to the road taxes. Yeah, happy to do that. Another source of tax revenue that we have is our utility taxes. This is, there's 4 different sources. This is the conglomeration of those 4 types of property, of utility taxes. For some time they were going down, then basically due to inflation, we've had some increases in those in the last few years. You can see when the COVID occurred. And then I think you've all felt that in your utility bills lately. Individually, I've broken those out so you can kind of see what the trends are. Natural gas, each one of these has a little bit of a bigger scale. So for example, cable TV tax, what's been happening to cable TV? Well, people are cutting the cord. They're moving to things like streaming services. You felt the increase in your electricity bills. Telecommunications tax, that's another one that's kind of obvious as people switch away from telephones to other type of communication services. They seem to be going out. And that's been, it seems like every year I can't project how much lower it can go, and it just keeps going. I keep expecting a floor on that, but it keeps going down. Natural gas has been the big one in the last few years. And that's hit us all. And, you know, it's a good thing from a revenue point of view, but from an expense point of view, we use a lot of natural gas in our facilities. The expenditure looks like this. This balances with the revenues. The majority of our funds are spent on public safety. As you can see, police and fire make up about 50% of the expenditures. Non-departmental includes the transfers to things like the theater, to the fitness center, any place else that takes a subsidy. The rest of those are the departments and the expenses that are under their administration. This is the information I kind of given you in previous presentations. There were some questions that we had, and I was asked to be prepared to bring up what bonded debt we have if we can move from the budget. I don't know if we have questions on that before I move.
Can we get a breakdown of the non-departmental, admin, and the legislative?
Sure. Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, this goes without saying, but Nicole, you're keeping notes on this, so I don't need to probably write down the graphs, correct?
I am as well.
Okay, thanks, John. All right. These are the current bonds that we have outstanding. This is a portion of the slide that I've sent to you before. And it lists the type of bonds that they are. It has a source that we have identified for payment of these bonds. It also gives the purpose of those bonds, the origination date, the original amount, the current principal balance, and the payoff date. This column here, early payoff date, is it's called a call date. If they're callable, that means that they can be paid off. If they're non-callable, that means that we don't have the option of paying those off until they mature. And then the true interest cost is the average interest rate for those bonds.
So let's just start at the top and go through them one by one.
Sure.
So the first one.
First one is, would you like me to just explain them as I go through? Okay.
And explain the payoff balance. So if we paid it today, we'd only be paying the 13,900,000.
We can't pay.
Correct.
That's not what I said. I said if we could pay it today, we would only be paying the 13,940,000.
Yeah, so that's the cultural center and the arena. That's actually part cultural center and part arena. The cultural center portion is 52% of those bonds. The arena improvements were 48% of those bonds. So there's a bit of a split there. I don't think that's been clear going forward. So it's both those.
Say that
bonds.
again then.
So 48% of those bonds were issued for arena improvements.
Okay,
52% were issued for the construction of the cultural center bonds. Cultural center,
Which arena are we talking about?
the Maverick Center. Yep. Good question.
so the cultural center was built in 10.
The cultural center was built in 2002. They broke ground for it.
Okay,
So this is a refunding of the original bonds, which were issued in 2002.
okay.
Yeah, and you're correct. The current balance is the principal balance as of the last time we made a payment on it, which is this year.
But what's the principal and interest?
Principal and interest through the end of the year, through the end of that one is 49 million and something.
Okay,
And that would be similar to if you were to have a mortgage, you would say, okay, my pay off my house right now is $125,000. It's going to cost me 300,000 by the time that we make all the payments on it. Same philosophy, same theory.
okay, so we made our first payment on this one. last year.
2003, 2004. Oh, and then it was refunded, and then that's correct. This year, 2024 is the first payment on this one.
We didn't make a payment last year,
No, we didn't.
so the principal is less. So it acts like we've already made one payment.
We're taking the amortization beginning after we've made this year, because this year the payment's already budgeted. This is not up to the date. This is up to the end of the fiscal year. So at the end of 2024, the year that we're in a couple of months, that will be the balance.
But not the true balance, because the interest isn't in there. So that's just the
Correct.
principal, not.
That's true.
So can we get a chart that shows us what the current principal and interest is on all of these? So
Yeah.
we'll know what the full payoff is at the
We
end.
have,
The current, okay.
we have more of a deep dive into this one
Okay.
So I guess-
here pretty soon. So if you want to
Oh,
go through
okay.
the rest of them first, maybe, and then we can get into some detail on that
Well, and
one.
I guess, Mayor,
Okay.
let me get some clarification on that. When you say the interest that's due, because it's non-callable, you mean the interest that will be paid by the end when the total amount that we're paying?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, what the total cost will be at the end.
Mhm. And that is, actually that has been sent to you, and I do have that available. So for sure. Yeah, and we can get another copy of that out, and I can probably even boil it down to a summary sheet, so it's easier for you.
Okay.
Okay.
And the Embassy Suites, we
Okay.
sold that, so that bond,
It's essentially like a sale on contract. So when it's a
Very
contract sale,
good.
you still own it. You're still responsible for it, but somebody else has a contract to buy and is making the payments.
so we're financing the sale of we're self-financing that. We didn't just have them pay us for it.
That is correct.
So it's like when you sell your house and you're self-financing to the other person,
Yeah, so we built the hotel
correct?
and we financed the hotel with non-callable bonds. In order to sell the hotel, we had to do it on contract, and they have a contract to make us the payments. And the title will revert to them when they become callable or it pays off.
Okay.
So yeah, it's for us, it's a pass-through. They cover the whole thing. They cover the operations, they cover the debt. But it's still on our books because it's ours.
And we sold the hotel for the appraised value at the time that we sold it?
Don't recall the detail on that one. That was a redevelopment agency
Okay.
deal.
Can we- Yeah, maybe get that and so we know how much we got up front.
Yeah,
when we sold it.
that on the note.
Okay,
And so the payoff schedule is we will have it paid off by 2037.
That is correct.
Go ahead.
On the non-callable debt, you can pay it off early, but there's penalties. Right?
Yeah, they make whole provisions. So for example, the cultural center is a really good point. If we were to pay that off early, we could do it. We just cut them a check for $49 million. So you have to make whole the amount of the total contract.
because you pretty much, especially since we didn't even start paying on it for 14 years. The people who bought those bonds are expecting a certain payoff because they weren't getting money for their money for 14 years.
You're right
So
on.
now they're gonna have a higher return.
Yeah, they expected that.
Almost 7% on that one.
Yeah, so there was a delay in that one based on the projections for revenue. We can get into detail on that one. Yep. But yeah, that's the non-callable provision is you just have to pay off the total amount. It would be just like, I mean, if we did have the money to pay off any of these non-callable notes, we'd basically just stick it in a bank account somewhere and what they call self-defeasing it, or basically we say, okay, we've got the money, we'll pay it from that pot and we just won't worry about the payments anymore and have the bank take care of it.
Here to have a follow-up question here. So you have a sale of character contract. So you have a monthly payment to us. Is that monthly payment, we have enough money to pay the debt service?
Oh, yeah.
Keep money in,
Yeah, they're paying us 100% of the debt service.
okay, and they've been doing,
No problem at all. Like clockwork. Okay, let's see. I talked about the hotel. The next one, a bunch of these are redevelopment agency notes. The city center project, as I recall, this one had to do with redevelopment. Well, the next one's for the mall down there. I'm not, I don't have the detail in my brain of every one of these RDA projects. But that's, I can tell you where they were, but not which ones they were. I mean, there was the redevelopment of the area on the block over here that's occurring. There's the redevelopments occurring at the mall. The Costco property was a separate area. There's a number of properties that included infrastructure improvements that we needed to do. Maybe we need to put in, our deal was to put in streets or to put in stormwater or to provide some sort of infrastructure deal. And that's what those redevelopment agency bonds are. Each one of those are paid with redevelopment agency increment. And I don't want to assume that everyone knows what that is, and I'd be happy to explain increment at some point so that we know what that is. But basically what it is, it's that when you create a redevelopment area, that area, they freeze the property values of the properties in that area. And then the money that developers need to come and do development usually goes back to them as they build on that property. Their value goes up and that money, some of it will come back to them to help them cover their cost of development. So they'll continue to develop and that money comes back to the RDA also to cover this debt service. So these are all covered by RDA increment or property tax that the RDA collects by new development. On the Maverick Center, that one's composed of a couple of different items. When we found it economically feasible to combine bonds, we've done that. Sometimes the bigger bond you put together or the more financings you put together, less expensive it is. We'll get better rates. We'll also get economies of scale with underwriting costs. So in this case, you remember the fire stations that we have built. They were included in this Maverick Center refinancing that we did in 2016. And that was done in 2016 to take advantage of lower rates. That's why the rate is so low, 2.37%. We saw that as an opportunity when the economy was was amenable to that. And so we refinanced the Maverick Center and then we also financed some fire stations at the same time. Yes, Mayor.
Okay, so I guess I'm not, so the fire stations were 7 million. Correct?
There were
Was it when we did 72 and
a couple of
6?
different fire station projects.
Or 3?
There were 5 just the 3. Well, there were the 3 that we just built that were also financed with the.
This is the only fire one I see.
Okay, yeah, that's correct.
It
Those were
looks
the-
like it was 7 years ago that we did that.
I know.
I mean, doesn't it seem like they're all just brand new? Has it been 7 years? 8 years?
Well, we got the financing in place probably before they were completed, but
They were completed?
Right.
Okay, so they were 7 million. What was the difference to make it a 30 million bond for the Maverick Center?
it would have been the balance on the Maverick Center.
But
There was no additional funds that were added to it.
But what bond were we refinancing if the very first one was 48% was for the Maverick Center of that 14?
There's 2 different Maverick Center bonds. The one that was 48% is for only improvements. When the Maverick Center was purchased,
Okay.
when Maverick Center was built, it was in 1998, as I recall.
Okay.
The suites, the infrastructure behind, for example, the kitchen, a lot of I think the restaurant, a lot of those improvements were not completed. The building was turned over to the Dave Elmore's management group, Centennial Management, and he came in and out of his pocket, he finished all that, and that was about $7.5 million. The city agreed to finance that $7.5 million after he'd fronted the money, and that's what was added to those bonds back then. So this bond that we're talking about right now was only for the building. The 7.5 that was added to the cultural center bonds was for improvements that were necessary and paid for by Centennial Management Group. I believe it was Centennial. Have to look at that one, but that's where that money went. Yeah, good question. And the maturities are different on both of those, obviously.
So we put over $30 million into the Maverick Center. We got 48%, and now we have 75% with the fire station. Before that, we have 48% and plus 52% with the Maverick. I mean, with the UCCC.
That's on the. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because the item number 3 right here is 2011. You got 48% construction Maverick construction right there, plus with the 52% with the UCCC, that's the $49 million. And now the one you're talking right now with Maverick, with the fire station, you got 75% and 25%. Is you add up but 2 items right there, it's over $30 million for Maverick. Correct?
Correct. Yeah, the Maverick Center cost, I don't, the total amount is a portion of each of those bonds. So the 48% of the 2010 bonds and the 75% of the 2016 bonds. That's another way to look at it.
How the revenue for the Maverick is that we get back to the money we spent.
You mean, does it break even?
Yeah.
Do they pay for themselves?
Yeah.
The Maverick Center operations for virtually all the history of the Maverick Center has been subsidized by the city. This last year, they actually had a positive. So they actually did pay more than their expenses. So they're starting to move the right direction.
Yeah, but one thing is very upsetting me, or I feel uneasy about this. One thing I just shared to the mayor a few weeks ago. Subsidized by the city, but we didn't or we don't take good care of that. I'll tell you why. 6 years ago or 7 years ago, if someone went to safety box and stole $20,000 cash from safety box, we never heard anything about it. And I promised that person I wouldn't say anything. Never bring it back to the council. Never catch the bad guy.
I'm not familiar with that.
Well, now you know. See, that subsidized by the city, and the city took care of that mapping, and that's why I have a bad taste about this place. So I want to sell it. We bleeding. It's $20,000 cash inside a safety box. The bad guy went in, took that money. The inside job, it's not the outside person. Camera wasn't there. Nothing's were there to catch that guy. And we never heard anything about the council. It's sad. All I see is a perfect thing about the picture of West Valley City. Everything's perfect, everything's so nice, everything's so fine. But the truth is, they don't tell me the truth. See that $20,000 cash inside a safety box? Who gonna go in there and get that money or steal that money? Homeless not gonna do that. Think about it. And subsidized by the city. The city taking care of that, but I'm not gonna tell you, I'm not saying about you, I think it's the whole city. I feel very uneasy.
But that has nothing to do with the bonded debt that we have
That's
for
what I
it.
said, I didn't say anything.
And so
about it.
I think it's a discussion of history and history can't be changed. So,
But the thing that the word saying is subsidized by the city, but we don't take good care of that. That's the word I'm saying.
Okay, so to the refund of the mall.
This was also a bond that was refunded that had higher interest rates before. The redevelopment agency bond for the Valley Fair Mall and other projects which they had. The detail on that one, it's the same with all the rest of them. I would assume that that's probably the Costco property and whatever properties are involved with that one. We will refund on a regular basis. Refunding means that we'll just refinance these bonds. So it's another word for refinancing. When the market is such that we're able to have at least a significant savings, usually 5 to 7%, we'll go out and refinance them. So we've been very aggressive in that. And I think as is indicated by the true interest cost over on the right-hand side, we've been pretty successful on those. Those that we haven't been able to refinance, we haven't done, but those that we have, we have. Federal law allows us only to do that once. And so once it's done, until they change the law, we're stuck with the new interest rate. But I think we've done a pretty good job. When the economy was kind of having problems a few years back, that's when we did a good portion of these. And we do that in consultation with our advisors. The 29209 infrastructure and mall, same sort of thing. There's plenty of detail on each one of these. We refinanced that one in 2016. You can see that there's kind of a trend going on there. In 2016, we refinanced a whole bunch of them because the rates were so attractive. We have the parking structure, the police department headquarters and the courts were all financed together. And that was to get some economic benefit from the size. Public Works and Parks Building, of course, you remember that one. We're getting a little bit closer into recent history for you. That's funded by the general fund, and those two projects were part of the capital improvement plan that Mr. Pyle presented to you on paying for infrastructure with bonds that we're currently paying off. I don't remember which one's paid off, but we're able to keep basically the same cash flow going to put into these new buildings and projects, which were needed. The 2020 refunding of the 2010 BAB bonds or Build America bonds. I don't know if you remember when those came about in 2028, but it was President Obama had a stimulus program where he said, if you issue these bonds taxable, we will pay you back the money of the difference between taxable and tax exempt. There were 2 times during that our payment of those original bonds since 2008 when they wouldn't give us that money. And the risk of continuing to carry those bonds was not worth it to trust the federal government to give the money back, especially when we could refinance those at a very low rate. So we did refinance those and we're no longer beholden to the Build America federal money coming back in. The transportation infrastructure bonds, that is the additional sales tax that was put in place to go directly towards roads and improvements. That shows up in the public works budget, and every dollar of that goes to pay for these bonds. And then, of course, the courts remodeled. You're familiar with that as our latest infrastructure project. To give you an idea how that looks from a principal outstanding and what pays off point of view, this slide shows the principal amount. Obviously, it declines every year because we make payments, and so it's very even and very steady. And then I put little tags on there that kind of show when each of these bonds pay off, just for your future reference. And that's my discussion of the budget so far.
Actually, I thought you went over this probably 2 minutes ago, the difference between a revenue bond and a lease bond.
Sure. Let me go back to the previous page and I'll kind of define some of those terms. So well, it looks like I don't have them. Okay. Okay, let's take the first one. Sales tax revenue bond 2010. A revenue bond is by nature of the bond tied to a specific type of pledge that the city has made. The city has said on a revenue bond, we will pledge this particular source, which is sales tax, to back it up. That's the source of our guarantee. Technically, if the city defaulted on this, then the people that own those bonds could come back and they could demand that the state pay them the sales tax instead of us. So it's a very strong pledge when you have a tax revenue bond. There might be other types of revenue bonds, for example, a redevelopment agency, property tax bonds. There might be franchise tax bonds, something that they can attach is what that is. A lease revenue bond is something where the city has elected to do bonding through the building authority. So we have the other agency called the Building Authority, which is used specifically for debt service. And if we issue bonds through the Building Authority as a lease revenue bond, we basically have a lease with the Building Authority to use that facility that we build. And then the title reverts to the city when the bonds are paid off. And the city can use whatever source it needs to make those bond payments. Is that adequate? Yeah. Good questions, though. Those are technical things that a lot of people don't get into. So.
So the lease financing.
Okay. Yeah, I'll conclude this portion and then I'll move over to, there was a question that came up that I'm assuming you'd like me to work on this one. This is the CABS bonds options. Is that where we'd like to go with this?
Sure, if you're ready for that.
Yep.
I didn't know when you said later, I didn't know how much later. So
Oh, no, it's your time and your meeting. So I just want to move at whatever pace you're ready to go forward with. Okay, let's see if I can figure that out really quickly, how to get into that guy. Okay, so the question came up, how can we, what can we do about the debt with the Cultural Center and the Maverick Center, that combined bond? We've been calling it the Cultural Center bond, but in reality, it's that 52%, 48%. So take a second while this boots up here. See if your screen looks like mine. Doesn't. Okay.
I want to unshare and then.
Is that what I need to do? Okay. Or new share, does that work, Eric?
Maybe.
Yeah, you should.
Okay. Let's see how this guy works for me this time. Okay. Okay, first I'll do a little bit of a recap and then I will explain some terms that have to do with the cultural center bonds, because this has got some, I don't want to get bogged down in the terms. So if you have something that comes up that I've said, please ask me what it means and I'll help explain that to you. The cultural center bonds were issued as originally in 2002 to build the cultural center. It was built based on projections that were received from the RDA, which was an estimate of what revenues would be over the lifetime of the bonds. The debt service was, or the debt schedule was customized to match those projections. Over the years, as you know, projections have changed. And at this point, there doesn't appear to be sufficient money coming from the RDA to make all of those payments. So that's what brings us to today. The money that was to pay for those bonds was called SAR, or additional increment. There's RDA increment, which is, tell you what, let me go here. Okay, so the way traditional increment works is like the slide on the left. Let's get that over here so you can see it. So when an RDA is created, they establish a base year. And as I said, the values of those properties within the area are frozen. As the redevelopment area develops and increased property values introduced into that area, it generates additional revenue from property tax. That's called the regular increment. There's regular tax increment, which is split between the redevelopment agency and the other taxing entities. I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but we make negotiations with a group called the TEC, or the Taxation Entity Commission. Is that close?
Not anymore, but we used to.
Okay, well, we used to do that.
New name?
Well, they change the laws on us pretty regularly.
Yeah, well, we're not even called RDAs anymore, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so for simplicity,
Yeah.
there are other people that participate in these and we have to negotiate how much money they get. When the redevelopment area ends, this line right here, is it showing my mouth? Yeah. Then whatever the value of the property is, then goes back to all of the participating taxing entities that are in that area. So it'd be the city, it'd be the school district, it'd be the state, it would be everybody that has a piece that goes into that. So think of that, this is the regular increment, this piece right here. Okay, let's go to the slide over here. I have no idea why that one popped up. There, that looks much better. Over time, the life of the RDA generates regular increment, but as the area ages, the amount of increment that goes back to the redevelopment decreases. So they may get 80% 1 year. 5 years later, they may get 60%. I don't remember what the amounts are, but it goes down over the years.
So what tax are we talking about? Because this is a city building or a county building. It's not,
We're talking property tax.
no property tax on public
Right.
buildings.
That is correct. So this is money that's available for payment of debt. That's another way to look at it. So I'll get there. I promise I'll get that. So, and this is to lay a foundation for where the cultural center is supposed to be paid for. Okay, so in 1993, there was a law passed, and it was modified in 97, that allowed for not only the regular increment that's generated, but the difference between that increment and the total value of the property is called SAR, or the statutorily, I can't remember what it's. Anyway, I like it. So it's the additional increment. That additional increment by state law could be paid for recreation facilities, like the Family Fitness Center, could be sports venues, or it could be for things like cultural event centers. And that's probably the easiest way to explain it. So this additional increment is available to make the payments on the cultural center. Okay, now let's go back to the other one, and I'll explain what happened here. Okay, so the cultural center, let's see, where's the debt here? Okay, so the cultural center debt, this is the composition of the original bonds, the 2010 bonds. And this is the original debt structure. It means that every one of these years, this is the principal amount, this is the interest, this is how much we have to pay. You can see through 2026, the next 2 years, it's $1.5 million. I didn't include 2024, because that's already been budgeted, but we started in 2024. So for the next 2 years, there's about $1.5 million that's due. Then in 2027, this is why I believe we're having this conversation right now. It starts to significantly ramp up. And it stays about $5 million for 3 years, then goes to $6 million in 2030, 4.8, and then levels off right around $4 million until we pay off the total amount of $49 million. That's non-callable. We have to pay the $49 million. That's an easy way to look at it. How we come up with that then becomes the discussion. That was originally anticipated that it would be paid for with the SAR, and the projections indicated that that additional piece of revenue that's coming into the RDA would be there to pay it. That has not played out, and I'm not sure of all the reasons for that.
I'm happy to address at any point if you like.
So I'm happy if you want to have John come up. He's the expert on it, and that's why he's here today to answer these detailed questions.
One here from John. See John.
And I won't get too, sorry, John Springmeyer. And today I think I'm here as the newest member of Team Interim as the Interim Redevelopment Agency Director. Briefly, the SAR, and you're right, the Cultural Center and the Maverick Center are both public entities and therefore pay no property tax. The additional increment provision applied to all project areas. So any project area we had in the city, if it was a 15-year term, we got an additional 10-year term on the back end of that. If it was a 25-year term, we got additional 7 years. Back pre-93, those were the only provisions we had. You had 15 at 100%, you had 25 at 75% collection. That was the rules, and they were hard and fast. Those SAR monies kicked in. Now, it's of note, SAR did not include all of the taxing entities. So the city, the county, all the special service districts, all automatically participated in SAR, with the exception of the school districts. They only voluntarily participate in SAR. And as you can imagine, that they have not volunteered ever. And so that's kind of how SAR makes up. Part of the challenge of this is and understanding this was 2002, obviously this was pre any of us. The SAR provisions at that point were there, and the theory that I'm assuming that the mindset at that time was, with each project area, new one we create, we're building that pipeline and we're extending that SAR period out as each project area scales down and contributes more to SAR. Then we reached 2006, and the state legislature made, in my opinion, the most substantive changes to redevelopment laws since we enacted it in 1978. And this is when we went from the RDA as an area name to the CRA, EDA, and CDA. No, sorry, CDA, EDA, and God, I'm blanking. CDA, RDA. Anyway, we went to the substantial changes at that point. In that new legislation, SAR was eliminated. The additional years of increment that followed that, whether it be 7 or 10 additional years, was eliminated from state law.
So the extensions were eliminated.
Correct. Yeah, so all of our project areas that were established pre-2006 have a SAR provision. Depending, it varies depending on which project area and the original term of that project area. But anything post '06 no longer has any of that revenue, and that was statutory. I can only assume that in 2002, they couldn't possibly have it imagined, let alone projected that that would have been the case.
So John, yeah. So SAR was eliminated, and then who would do who jump in and do it? Is that the city?
Once SAR was eliminated,
Yeah.
who was going to
over.
take over the backfill of the debt? Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation that obviously didn't include me at the, I wasn't,
So us, the city, West Valley City have to do that.
well, I mean, it's, this is a redevelopment agency bond.
It's city debt.
The city.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanna, yeah, correct.
And so they changed the rules partway through the game.
Yeah, and that's
And-
part of it.
So the original SAR was still good, but you couldn't add on any future.
And we're still
Projects.
collecting SAR.
Yeah.
We still have, I think the next year's projections for the budget, I think we've got somewhere around, off the top of my head, around $2 million.
I'll include
That will,
that.
that will
Cards,
do.
I'll show you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it went down because of the rule change.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I mean, you're welcome to stay here and
Yeah,
stand.
sure.
You probably will have more questions. The debt that we currently have right now was based on entirely those SAR projections. So the ones that we had when this was financed, this is the amount of SAR that we would have expected to receive through 2036.
are you gonna send us that? Because that's way too small to see.
What did I do?
There you go.
Okay, my apologies.
Thank you, Lois.
If you can do it with that.
All it takes is a mouse. I once had a commercial, I was in a commercial lending class one time and he emphasized the only difference between big transactions, little transactions is 1 or 2 zeros. So, so anyway, so that's where these numbers came from. The idea was that the city would never have to come up with additional money. The world changed on us and here we are today. We are facing this type of an issue. So what I've done is I've gone through and come up with a number of different scenarios on how this could be paid. Since it is a city debt, we have to pay for it. We have pledged our sales tax, so we are on the hook. This is a bond that we have to pay. It's an obligation. And I would never suggest that we don't pay an obligation. That would be, that would affect your future, it'd affect your ability to develop everything. So we just don't do that in Utah. Anyway, so I've come up with several proposals and I'll go through each one of these and explain to them as we go through. And each one has positives and negatives. Some of those negatives are political, some of those negatives are financial, and some of those are structural issues, but there are different ways we can slice and dice this, and there are ways that we can handle this. So just going into that, I want you to know that these are not all weighted the same as far as priority, and that's basically up to you to decide what do you feel would be the best way to handle this. And I've gone through and put together these scenarios for your consideration, gone through them with John and John and John.
Tried to make it easy with names.
Multiple times. Yeah, that's true. Come back. Oh, great.
Freeze up.
I don't know if it frees up or died. Let me plug it into power and see if that fixes my issue.
You're up, you're still on phase 3.
Yeah, there's nothing here. So that's just the last one that showed. If I'm gonna have to reboot the computer, if you wanted to have a little 5-minute
Okay.
break, I would advise that. And then I'll come back with scenarios. Thank you so much.
It was.
Okay.
It's on the schedule anyway.
Good to know.
Is it? Okay.
Oh, at 10 o'clock was the break, so we're good.
Oh,
Right.
how time flies.
Please.
Yeah, really, right? Talking big numbers.
Oh.
I hear you. This thing, this literally shut down. So I have to relog in.
Juice?
What's that?
Run out of juice?
Yeah, it did, but I preempted and had power up here, so.
There's a bunch of extra power strips. Well, but it's like you have decent power.
I anticipated this. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We couldn't, I was trying to plug my. Oh, yeah. Up in over there and it rejected the power source 3 times. I said that's not enough power for me.
See.
I have my, I have my extra monitor hooked up. And so I guess it was just drawing too much. And I didn't bring my normal.
Insufficient power for a man of your stature.
So
Yes.
Eric. Okay, thank you.
Otherwise, it's just Michael. He's gonna be like,
All right.
Excellent. Thank you for your patience. I'm glad we were able to have a little break there. That's good.
Here, got this back on the LP.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do.
We're ready to go. Okay, good deal. Okay, so we'll now go through the payment options. This particular spreadsheet you don't have in your packet. I can certainly share that with you so that you can go back and look at it. We can provide that. I'm sure that you'd want that for consideration. Another reason that we're looking at this right now today is that this becomes effective this fiscal year. The ability to use money that's coming out of the RDA to pay in particular, the cultural center portion of the bond is significantly limited and has strings attached to it, which we'll talk about a little bit in the future. But we,
Today, future
In a
or
minute.
future, future?
In a few
in like a
minutes.
few
Okay.
minutes, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, no, when I say a few minutes, the future is like now, but
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, and I'm mentioning that because it's something we need to cover this budget year. Maybe that's the better way to put it, which we have to actually have the tentative budget passed in the end of March. We have to post it. So we're coming up on that pretty quick. Okay, so there's a debt structure, and here's some options, as I said, without necessarily rank or priority, and we can discuss the nuances as we go through. I asked Mr. Springmeyer to update the SAR projections for these scenarios. So he's done that. He sent them to me a couple of weeks ago, and I've applied them in each of these scenarios as they currently are part of the debt service payment. Yes.
Make that a little bigger.
Oh,
Yeah, can you make any of them bigger?
tell me when to stop.
That's good.
Okay. I want you to be able to see it.
I'm sorry.
I know.
Okay,
Man,
great.
he says you guys want a
Can you
physical
send
copy?
that to me?
Yeah, it's on my thumb drive, so I'll get it to you. No.
Okay, I'll print them for you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
And I mean, it's been pretty live up until last night. We were making sure that we had all the scenarios included. So it's a fairly fresh new document with a lot of different scenarios. We're trying to make sure it's accurate as possible and gives you the options. So first option is payment with SAR. Based on the current SAR projections, which Mr. Springmeyer provided, this is what the payment looks like beginning this fiscal year. And these are the annual shortfalls. So if we use just the existing SAR, we still need to come up with $32 million. Yes.
Okay, so you're saying we didn't make a payment last year,
We,
but you don't show a payment up there for this year, for 24.
I'm showing, correct.
23, we did not make one.
Correct. In 24, I'm not showing that payment because we are going to make it. It's
But from
25
source?
forward.
But from what source are we doing the
SAR.
24? The 24 will be
Yeah,
SARS
from
as
the
well?
redevelopment agency. The redevelopment agency has covered that.
I'm confused about the RDA, SAR and shortfall. Shouldn't they add up to the total payment?
They do. This equals this plus this. So,
Okay.
yeah, they're short. They're actually short. They don't have enough SAR this year to cover it. So they'd actually have to cover that from their fund balance. That's the difference.
The RDA's fund balance,
Yes.
which is separate than the city's fund balance.
Yes. Yeah, the redevelopment agency does have a fund balance right now. It's approximately 15 million. That's composed of a couple of different parts on it. Some of it's obligated for debt service, some of it's unobligated. But that they do have fund balance. It's also regulated as to what it can be spent on. We'll talk the details further on that one when we get into some of the other scenarios.
I'll also qualify on that the reason that fund balance is as high as it is, the redevelopment agency receives revenue, our tax increment in two different payments twice a year. One comes in December and one comes in 1st of April. So the first payment is an estimate we receive in December, and then the last payment. We have obviously received that payment. We're not nearly as flush as the 15 million would make it indicate, because we just received like an $11 million check in December. So
Okay, so that 15 million hasn't been sitting there for a few years.
not even close.
4 million was sitting there. We just got 11.
Approximately, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Fund balance?
That's our. fund
That's,
balance.
that's their cash fund balance.
Yes.
Fund balance is a total amount of assets. So that would include any land that they hold for resale.
Mhm.
I don't recall what that is, but that's their
It's
liquid.
not all liquid then.
That's correct. Their liquid amount is 15 million.
One more question.
Yes.
Can we use that money?
Yeah, for
Can
those.
we use which money?
Yeah, it's,
That money to pay this or?
there's,
The 15 million?
the short answer, let me
Yeah.
let me kind of jump into that one a little bit, if I may.
All right, go ahead.
The short answer is, no. The longer answer is that part of it may be available, based on what the RDA laws say that we can spend it on. One of those things, and this will help as we go through the other scenarios, is that redevelopment increment can only be used technically within the area in which it's generated.
Yes.
Money can be lent to another area. For example, if increment is generated by Hercules, for example, it could be used. Is that one still around?
Excel.
Excel? Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I go back a ways.
If the southeast project area could loan money to the northwest project area, toward the Fairborn project area, yes, money can be loaned within different projects
But
area.
it has to have a potential to be repaid.
That's an interesting question.
Very good question.
Yeah, because it's loaned, but the requirements for repayment are not in the code. So it's kind of an interesting situation. Yep.
Until they change it, but yeah.
Well, yeah, until they change
They're
their
not
mind,
in there
right?
today. The legislature still has 2 more weeks.
Oh, I pray they don't mess with us on this. Anyway, okay, yeah, so Lars, back to your question. Yes, the red indicates that there's not enough money there. That would have to be covered by if under this scenario, it would have to be covered by the redevelopment agency. This portion, we don't have enough to make those payments under this scenario. There's a scenario that when Mr. Nord was here, and I know John's familiar with this, and that is part of the redevelopment plans are to eliminate the city center project, which would eliminate the SAR or the cash flow that's being generated off the SAR, and use that for other projects that may be in development. And those are important projects for the city. And but they do come at a cost, and the cost is that we basically lose the city center portion of the SAR that's available. And that's the difference between, well, it's about $10 million.
Yeah.
Is one way to look at it. So the SAR that's generated off of the other areas equals $6 million. That means that we would have to come up with $43 million somehow. And that's only if it's paid for with the SAR.
And so the whole point of these two scenarios is SAR is not gonna cover it.
No. Well, and there's not enough revenue from either source to cover it as well.
Okay, yeah, so we're kind of laying the groundwork here. Okay, now let's get into some other more interesting and somewhat complicated payment scenarios. This one is an option of, well, let me just keep that over here, and maybe that'll make that easier. This is the RDA pays with SAR and regular increment. And the regular increment that they generate would have to, and I'll go through the rules on that one, on what would happen. And if we were able to do that, there's no shortfall. So they'd have RDA SAR, here's the shortfall, then we take regular increment, use that, pay the rest of the debt. The issue with that,
But this is if we don't get rid of city center.
this is if we just use everything and leave it the way it is. So we keep city center, we use all of the SAR that's available, the $16.9 million, means we have a shortfall. Then we go to the RDA and the council takes an action that says that we will not only use the SAR, but we will use the regular increment that's projected to be generated by the RDA right now. There are some problems with that. And I would say this is probably one of the most difficult scenarios to use. As we mentioned a minute ago, the increment that's generated in an area is intended to be spent in the area that it's generated. Money can be lent to other areas. In this case, the cultural center is not in another area that it can be lent to.
It's not in a project area, period.
So that means that 52% of that bond is not in a project area.
Correct. The Maverick Center is in a project area,
In order to,
although one that is not a revenue producing project area. It's there to be able
Correct.
to receive funds.
But it
although
could,
would never.
right? It could.
It could.
It could.
If Tom could sell it, then yes, it would start generating. Yeah.
Well, and there's been talks of hotels in the parking lots,
Yeah.
all kinds. There's,
Yes.
they're projections, right? Okay, so the way to overcome this and be able to use some of those increments, say in the Maverick Center project, is the city would have to determine that the project area that's receiving the funds, or else the projects are being, the money that's being spent outside of project area has to substantially benefit each of those areas. So if, for example, we have the Hexel
Yep.
project that's on the other side of town and on our border, the increment that's generated there, if we wanted to use that to pay the cultural center debt, we would have to, as a body, and with the consultation of bond counsel and our RDA probably consultants, along with our financial advisor, come up with the supportable position that those projects substantially benefit from having the cultural center there. That was a really wordy way to say that you just have to justify that they're getting a benefit.
Yeah, what the law basically says with redevelopment is money generated within a project area must be spent within that project area or be shown to be a direct benefit to that project area. That direct benefit is not something that I, as the interim redevelopment director agency, can determine. Only you, as acting as the board, can determine and can say that is a direct benefit. That would be your action only.
And it would be something,
Got money away from that project area. What does it do to that project area?
Well, and that's where
Does it tank?
that's where it gets complicated because, I mean, if to extend that example, we have incentive agreements with Hexel in the Southeast project area. We're obligated to pay them a percentage of everything that they generate. So,
All their increased value, they get a portion back.
yes,
so we'd have to calculate what is the net revenue left over after paying those obligations in order to use that. And then the council would have to pass a resolution that says, we have determined that the cultural center benefits each of these areas this way, and therefore we're going to authorize the RDA, as the RDA board, it's an RDA resolution, to use those monies. I think that's a pretty high hurdle. I've spoken with our advisors, I've spoken with our RDA folks, and it's kind of a high hurdle to get there, but I wanted to throw you all the options. So that's one of them that's out there. Another thing it would do, even if we were able to do it, it does severely limit the redevelopment agency's ability to incent future development. So, you know.
keep the lights on.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
No, that said we'd net it by current expenditures. Come on. We'll keep the lights on. Okay, so that's pays with regular increment. This scenario's regular increment is used on the arena portion, given that the arena is in a redevelopment agency area. That means the 48%, and the SAR is used exclusively for the total debt service on the cabs or the cultural center portion. That would also give us a shortfall of 0, but it also requires that we have the regular increment discussion with regards to paying debt service on those additional parts of the Maverick Center. We're currently not spending regular increment on the Maverick Center debt or the Maverick Center additional debt for the cabs for the build out. So this represents a substantial change. We would again be dipping into the redevelopment agency's regular increment very substantially to the tune of about $2.5–3 million per year. But that's an option.
And also brings into your previous question about repayment of a loan.
Right.
We could loan money from other project areas to the multi-purpose project area, I believe is what it's officially called. But we also know in its current, the way it currently exists, there is no revenue generated from that because it doesn't pay property taxes. So
And the apartments around the Maverick Center are not part of the RDA.
Right. It is just.
That's the property.
Just the property doesn't even include lot D, is it?
Oh, really?
Doesn't even include lot D. It is just, it's a very small footprint of just the Maverick Center and the adjoining parking lot.
It's an interesting discussion.
Can you say that again, John? Can you say that again one more time?
The Mavericks, the project area that is the redevelopment project area for the Maverick Center only incorporates the building and the adjacent parking lot, does not include any of the other out parcels. Many of those other hotels and restaurants are in another project area, but they're not in the Maverick Center project area. They're in the Granger Crossings project area.
So those are two different ones.
Yes.
Okay, next scenario. This is under there, under the same one that we have. The RDA pays, let's see if I can. The RDA pays all the arena debt, both the cabs and the arena portion with regular increment and the UCC portion with SAR. And we kind of talked about that a little bit. This tells you what that would look like. So this one shows the first portion is the, here's the total payment. There's the UCC portion. That's the RDA SAR that could go towards the UCC portion. It would leave this kind of a shortfall. And then this is again using all of the SAR that's generated from all the areas. That would leave us with about a $600,000 shortfall at the end of the day. That's in 2036, which I think the city could figure out a way to do that one. The other one is that the arena portion of the cabs, that's the 48% is paid for with regular increment, and the cabs are paid with the SAR, and that's again the $600,000 shortfall. Okay, another option. That would be that the city says, okay, we've got to pay this obligation. We do have the ability to raise revenue through property tax increases. And here's a couple of options that way. If you take, and this does not include the SAR, this is just purely looking at property tax. So you can isolate that and see what the effect would be. Then you can slice and dice it and add pieces however you want to. The annual payment on the debt is here. If we were to, as a city, decide to adjust the property tax each year based on the additional cost of that debt, this is the approximate percent that would have to be done every year through truth in taxation. So in 2025, we need a 4.5% increase, then a 0.1% increase, then approximately a 10% increase. And this would happen every year. We'd actually see a couple of reduction years in 2031 and 2032, and then these following amounts to pay the final balance. And that comes up with a property tax amount that would pay the total amount of the debt. Another way to look at that is that if that's a painful option, you could just do it all at once. If you did it all at once, the amount needed to come up with the total amount that's due is $4.1 million. A one-time property tax increase of approximately 12% would come up with about $4 million. What we would do in accounting is we would take the $4.1 million, subtract the annual payment, and hold the rest into a reserve. And carry that reserve forward from year to year. By the end of the day, we actually end up $6 short in at the end of those bonds. But you never have to visit this again through truth in taxation once it's done. This also doesn't take into account using any of the available SAR, which is still available. So that's if you're just say we're just gonna do that with property tax increase. Okay, this one is the city uses the SAR, all SAR. This doesn't say without the city center SAR, which we could take out.
Right. And we can talk about that. We'll get to the difference of why city center in or SAR or why not SAR. We can address that.
If you were to do it with the SAR, it it makes the annual increases fluctuate like this. They're significantly smaller. There's a number of decreases throughout those years. Or if you want to do it one time, it drops that one time to 7.9%. That's with using all the available SAR. I don't have one of my scenarios does not include just using the city center SAR. So it'd probably be appropriate to address that now.
Yeah, we can talk about. So here's one of the challenges and why we've got scenarios with city center participating in SAR and without city center participating in SAR. The city center project area, we're in it right now. This building is in it. It incorporates this building, the mall. It does not incorporate the Wasatch development next door to us. But that's the Fairborn project area. But essentially it's, for all intents and purposes, it's the mall. That term for regular increment on that project area expires after 2026. That will be the last collection year we have for it. So we will at that point, that project area was created, that was the last one that was created prior to the law change. So that still, it has a SAR provision attached to it. And if no changes are made to that, it will automatically move into SAR. School district, again, obviously will be out. So the amount of revenue will be cut by about 46%, because that's about how much the school district has in there. And the remainder will go into SAR for a period of 10 years. That's if we do nothing. We know that the mall has new ownership and new development goals and opportunities over there. SAR cannot be spent in that project area. Once we go to SAR funds, we cannot use that money in that project area. We cannot use that money to offset any cost to participate in any improvements, parking structures, any kind of things that may come up over there. It can only be used under law for the debt service for the three facilities that we had, which is the fitness center, the Maverick Center, and the cultural center. Those are the only applicable things. So we will have no ability to participate or incentivize or have any financial influence over any new development. The counter to that is we could collapse. We could end the city center project area at the end of 2026, go back through the process, create a new project area, and start the clock again on a new project area on there. And it would, I don't want to make it sound easy because it's going to be a lift, but it would we would get an additional likely 15 years, could be more, of having regular income where we could do the things that the redevelopment agency is often doing with incentives and participating and offsetting costs and covering gap payments. By doing that, we eliminate the SAR that we're talking about the same dollar in there, and it can't be split two ways. So it's one or the other. We either have the ability to participate in the redevelopment of the mall, or we have the SAR for debt service, but we cannot have both. Does that make sense?
Thank you, John. Okay, let's see. The next one, as I said, we're throwing all kinds of ideas out there so that you have multiple options. This is all the things we came up with. This was consulting with John Evans. The city could create a special services fire district. Some other cities have done this, where they've gone out and they've said, okay, we're going to spin off a taxing entity to pay for fire services. If we did that, the city would still basically run the fire department. If they would have, we'd have a special services district that would be fire services. Every bit of money that is collected for fire services would go directly to the fire department for running that special services district. Now, how does that help us? Remember that $4.1 million that's needed every year to equal the $49 million. That would generate $4.15 million per year if the new services district had a budget of $19,900,000, and they paid the city an administrative cost of $4.1 million. I think there would be a fairly decent way to justify that. We're spending a lot of money on them already. But just their budget right now is the 15.7. That doesn't take into account the cost of administrating the fire department. That's legal, that's facilities, that's finance, that's everything else that goes into that. And that would have to be offset by the $4.1 million. So basically, there would be an increase that goes through to the citizens for that amount. And we would take that administrative fee, we would do it just like we did with property tax, and we would pay the debt service schedule. We would also keep a running ledger balance on what that is. So this is what it would be each year. And at the end of the year, at the end of the day, there'd be about $400,000 extra.
So let me try to reword this.
Please. Yeah, if I haven't said that clearly, I'd love to hear it reworded.
You're gonna carve out the fire department, create a new taxing entity, and then jack up the tax rates $4 million to fund this debt service.
Like a light fee.
I know.
So you might as well just do the property tax and not worry about it.
Yeah, you're camouflaging this tax.
As I said, everything has advantages and disadvantages, and I'm not trying to sell this to you.
Yeah.
But what that does is that also gives the fire services district the ability to control their own destiny in many, many regards. For example, they need a fire station that's rebuilt, or they need new apparatus. They can go out and address that through their own truth and taxation hearing to generate revenue for that new infrastructure, which they don't have right now, except for back through the city council.
Right.
Just a thought. But yeah, you're right. You've only got this pool of dollars. No matter how you slice it, it's going to have the same impact. But does that give us flexibility? We wanted you to have the option. It does give flexibility to the fire department, but I wanted you to have that in your brain. Okay. Over on the right-hand side, so when you get a copy of this, I put down the approximate property tax implications of doing this. Right now, the West Valley City is approximately 20% of your total bill, total property tax bill. The new rate, we'd be about 13% of your total property tax bill. And the new fire district would be about 9% of the property tax bill. That's just something for you to think about, so you understand the implication there. Okay, another option. The city ponies up cash and then uses other sources like RDA SAR or additional increment or increment that we've got to pay it. Right now, the city has the most healthy fund balance or unreserved designated money that we have in the general fund that we have for forever. The legal maximum right now is 35% of our budgeted expenditures. We are at 27%.
Was it in the past 25%? Or has it always been 35?
It was actually till about 3 years ago. That was changed by legislation. It was changed to 35%. The minimum is 4%. During the last what's that?
What did it used to be, 7 or 9?
No, it's always been 4.
It's always been 4?
Mm-hmm. It's always been 4. Matter of fact, in 2008, when we had that major recession, we got down to 4%. We actually dropped a little bit below that. And it was a calculated move. Mr. Pyle presented that rather than lay off employees. We had forced furloughs. We had all kinds of fun things that were going on. But nobody lost a job. And on the other hand, it was anticipated that we would use that fund balance down to the minimum and hopefully it would rebound. Well, it did. And we've been on pretty much a positive trajectory for a number of years to where we built it up to about 27% right now. And that's the difference. If you go back to that very first slide I showed you on revenues, that's the difference between your revenues and expenditures. So it's been positive rather than negative. If the city, and this is just for example, any number you could throw in here, if the city were to take $10 million, which is approximately 9% of our existing fund balance, apply that towards the debt, that would give us a balance of about 19.7. Realizing this is a moving target, that would put us at 17.9%. Slightly below the midpoint of between 4 and 35%. So it's a matter of comfort. How much flexibility do we need to have to take care of items when they come up with our reserves, and to be able to weather the storm of an impending recession? Because this is truly our rainy day fund, for lack of a better term. And it's also been a way that we've been able to finance some of our CIP needs and one-time things that have come up, like the program mod list, which is extensive, as you've seen. So that's the example there. Another option. Okay, so along with this, the city could sell property or use fund balance, let's say $15 million. That shortfall becomes $34 million. I'd like John to talk a little bit about the sale of the marketplace property. You remember that's the one up by the cultural center. It's not the cultural center. Before we get into this, the question of perhaps selling the cultural center has come up. If we sold the project that the SAR is being used for, we would no longer be able to use the SAR to pay the debt. So we need to, that facility at least needs to still be around. Otherwise, we have nothing to use that. In other words, that SAR can't be used on it. If we have no SAR, maybe it makes no difference. It's just part of the mix. I want to throw that out there. Anyway, the option is sell property.
The SAR could be used for?
There's not.
No.
It can only be used on projects that were initiated prior to 2002. The last one that was initiated was the cultural center. The other ones, the fitness center has paid off. And then we have some on the Maverick Center that it's being used on, which will also pay off concurrent with these ones. So there is a portion that could still be used, but that portion for the cultural center, if it goes away, we can't use SAR on it because it doesn't exist anymore. So we look at the property adjacent to it, and that's what this is. Although that doesn't rule out options with the cultural center. It just tells you how SAR can only be used. John?
Yeah. So everyone understands when we're talking about the Jordan River Marketplace land or the marketplace land, we all know what property we're talking about. Okay. That property is currently owned by the redevelopment agency. It was given back to us through court decree. And I know council have, different councils over the years have had different goals and aspirations for that property. One of the scenario we're going to propose here is that the redevelopment agency sells that property, sells it for development. I will tell you at this point, it is my professional opinion that the only use for that land for commercial is multifamily residential. It is mid-block. It is at the far east end of our city. It does not have commercial viability. That's my professional opinion. We also have, we have the multifamily development across the street. So we could sell that land. My estimations on that is we could get about, somewhere between 12, 15, maybe even more $1 million for that. As we know from the number of proposals and requests we get, multifamily is peaking right now. So that land is as valuable today as probably it's ever been.
How many acres is it?
It is 30. Oh, I've got that somewhere.
It's close enough.
Yeah, I have it. I'm
It's $20 a square foot.
Yeah.
It's 40 acres total, but we exchange something with the grantor, or we build the
Veterans.
veteran that take a little bit, so maybe 30 acres.
Yeah, I think I can look it up real quick and give you an exact, but
$20 a foot divided by $15 million.
yeah. Remember that land also has a power line, transmission line corridor right through the middle of it. I believe that you could get a quality residential development in there that could incorporate that either as parking or as open space in there. One of the advantages of the fact that the redevelopment agency owns this land versus the city owning this land is we do not fall under the same rules of disposition. We, meaning the redevelopment agency, have different laws of disposition than the city does. City is legally required to take highest bidder when we're selling highest price. We don't have those provisions within the redevelopment agency. We could and would, if this was the desire of the council, put this out for an RFP. We would request proposals from any and all multifamily developers, and we could choose that developer not just based on price, but based on the project that they're proposing. You know, and you know, somewhere in a balance of there. But it's going to be, if it's sold, it's going to be residential. That is its development potential. Yep. The second component to that would be that if we do that, right now that's city owned or RDA owned property, and as tax exempted, we don't pay any property taxes on that land. We sell it to a private entity, a tax paying entity, and it's developed. Now all of a sudden it's paying property tax. And as Jim's slide showed earlier, when we're talking about tax increment, how that works, it starts at a base year. Well, that base year right now is zero. It's nothing. So every dollar, even just transferring it from a tax exempt to a non-exempt entity, all of a sudden we're generating, you know, significant amounts of money in taxable value just by the transfer of land, even before it's developed. If this is something that we wanted to do, I would suggest that in conjunction with this, we create a redevelopment project area there. We would include the cultural center in that project area. Now the cultural center is in a project area and can receive loan funds from other project areas, eliminating that hurdle of direct benefit that we have right now. The JRM property is currently in a project area. It's in the Jordan River project area, that is one that is old enough that has gone full SAR. It's generating roughly $200,000 a year. My calculation, we would have to collapse that because we can't have overlapping. We can't have two on the same property. So we would collapse that. We would lose the $200,000 annual in SAR. However, we would gain an additional, by my calculations, off of, you know, proposed development and what we think we could get there, at least another $750,000 annually for a period of 15, 20 years, whatever we could get the taxing entities to approve. So, and that's the net of, you know, 750 is the net of that. So I'm taking the 200 off of that. I think we could generate $900 to $1 million a year in that. Take the 200 and we're calling it a net 750. 750,000 doesn't solve our problem, but 15 million in cash, an additional $750,000 a year for a period of 15 to 20 years. It could be part of the solution. It will not be all of the solution. Any questions on that before I step to the left? Okay.
So I guess a way to kind of think about that one is if we had a $15 million injection, and we've used that based on John's estimate of what he could sell the property for. And this one says use city center SAR, which continues. This property tax increase of 1.3 is, what were you saying, about $900,000 would be what you'd be able to net off of the increment? About 750. So that cuts this amount in half that the city would have to come up with if it began to immediately generate that, which is going to be a lag of a couple of years.
Right.
But it gives you an idea that a good portion of this could be covered, at least possibly half of it, if it was fully developed and we were able to sell the property. Make sure everybody followed that one, because that's kind of an,
That was a lot.
yeah, it was.
So the city center SAR, if we dedicate it all to this, nothing will be dedicated to any help with future development at the mall.
That's correct.
We can lose out the competitiveness.
In order to maintain that, we have to collapse the existing city center and we would have to create a new project area and start that clock over again.
Okay, all right. Yeah, that was an interesting one, so I appreciate that.
So the city center SAR is 18 million is what it would contribute
If,
if we leave it in place
Correct.
and use it all.
yes, based on the current projections, like everything else.
And these are my best projections based on a whole lot of unknowns about what is going to take place over there. But yes, this is existing and what we know about potential future development over
This is such an interesting discussion because again, we're making decisions based on the best information we have at the time. You know, so
Like they did.
there. Which is exactly how we got into this mess.
touche, touche.
It's an abundance of caution.
Good point. The other option, in order to flatten out the payments so we don't have those big swings from $1.5 million up to $6 million and then steadying out at 4, we could flatten out those payments and actually self-defeat this or refinance it through new bonds. We would go out and we would issue bonds for the amount that it takes to pay off the existing bonds. We'd have to stick that in the bank, earn interest on it based on whatever the current rates are. We would invest it in treasury bills or some other type of investment paper that pays a consistent rate. We know exactly what our earnings are going to be for the life of these bonds. And these give you different scenarios on what that would be. It doesn't cover the whole, but these are the payments that we'd have if we did that. So with no equity contribution, we could flatten them out for 30 years at 2.2, but then 30 years instead of, that puts us 2053, you get this paid off. That's a long time to be paying debt. And 25 years also. But I also wanted to throw that out there. So you do have the option of flattening things out if you wanted to carry the debt out that much further. This is the total cost of each of those scenarios. And that's it. And like I say, Tom, oh, it's that easy to say, isn't it?
That's it.
Yeah. There's a lot of ways to slice and dice it. So bits can be added together. I tried to include the most substantial proposals. And then, you can think of different ways that you might want to put it together. But hopefully something as we've gone through that, you've seen the caveats, you've seen the benefits and the realities of where we're at with this too. So.
One thing to say about it, Jim, I'm so glad you brought it up today. Which we didn't know that for a long time. Second thing is it's unfair for the new city manager. He come in here and have the big hole, have to cover this,
Oh, I thought it'd be great. Here you go.
Yeah. But, yeah, I would love to hear from other council.
Well, and I think this is a situation where, the governing body ultimately has responsibility for the budget, or the impact on the citizens, the impact on the services that the city provides. And yeah, I mean, this has been there ever since it was put together, but the scenarios that we're looking at felt like they needed to be addressed right now because we're starting to make those payments. And this year we need to take some kind of action. The redevelopment agency could cover most of it still, but we're kind of in that, at least the first couple of years, that $1.5 million, but we're kind of in that gray area of justification. When you start making payments in the next couple of years where it goes $3, $4, $5 million,
$6.
Yeah, we absolutely have to have that solved. So we need to take action now. We've got to have the question answered before we hit those big ones, because without making that resolution by the RDA board, which is the city council, we would not be complying with state law.
And all of these scenarios have a time lag associated with them too, whether it's whether it's property tax increase, whether it's the sale, development and collection and creation of a new project area and all those. I mean, that's a 2-year process. So, you know, it's time.
One thing with the property tax increase, that would have to be, we as a city council, that would have to be determined by June. It would be preferable to build it into the tentative budget. But it has to be determined by June so that we can turn it in as the new proposed certified tax rate to the state for consideration by the council in August. So we got to get moving on it if that's one of the routes we're going to take.
Well, I was gonna say, our first 2 payments are 1 point whatever.
1.5.
1.5. So we can handle that this year, possibly next year, and then refinance or make these big decisions. So it's not like we have to make it this year. We still have 1 more year of moderate payment.
That is one of the options. It does give you some breathing space in it. We are using increment that we're assuming is available, but we haven't taken legislative action to say that it is available.
Okay, so that RDA SAR money was not already put towards this.
It is.
It
Yeah,
is.
but we'd have to, we would need additional.
But we've also got Maverick Center debt that's on there too.
So
So right now SAR's getting pulled 2 ways.
So what we would do is, in order to keep us within compliance, is we would, rather than use SAR for both payments, we would use SAR for the cultural debt service payment, whatever's available for the Maverick Center, and then use regular increment as a loan to the RD, to the Maverick Center. That would get us by for another year or 2.
Okay.
Hey, Jim, you said about this body is will be responsibility for this thing, we have to pay the debt. But the thing is, I want to share with you is it's unfair to us. We didn't know anything until maybe last year. We heard about, $40 million or $50 million about over this UCCC and that kind of area. And kind of we were appalling. And basically didn't come up for a long time, and now we found out it's a lot of money we have to pay. Is that you said about the body, this body will be responsible to pay, but we didn't know it's unfair. To be honest with you, it's unfair to us.
It is what it is,
Yeah.
right? Tom?
I understand.
Yeah, go. Move
Yeah,
the change
But
fast.
I would be interested in doing an RFP and just seeing what interest there is out there for that property. I don't know if anybody else is interested in that. I mean, it doesn't bind us to anything.
Correct.
RFP would be great to at least test the waters.
Yes.
We're gonna be.
And that's one scenario that if we wanted to go that direction, that's something we would want to get started now.
Right.
Yes. That has the longest lag time before we get substantial revenue. Understanding, as I stated earlier, if we put out an RFP, if we selected a project and a developer that we like and we sell that property, we get some of that valuation immediately because it becomes a taxable entity. But the real upside is going to be in the development of that property, which is an 18 month to 2 year window. So,
Except
Except
there's,
for the 15 million we get up front.
yeah,
except for the cash up front. Yes, there would be some immediate financial benefit. Cash.
We could use that 15 million to make payments for a number of years.
Yes.
the problem is, there's like 50,000 entitled units in Utah, and they're just not developing them. So how do we make sure the developer buys it and immediately builds on it and doesn't hold it for 10 years?
Yeah.
Some of these entitled properties have been held for 20 years.
Yep.
And I don't want to get it, I mean, we sell it anticipating the property tax. We have to have a hard, yes, we're definitely going to develop this, and there's going to be penalties if we don't.
And I don't want to speak for the gentleman in the bow tie in the back or in the bolo tie in the back. But I would imagine there are a number of provisions that we could write into into the real estate purchase contract that would require, construction start within reasonable time frame, and again, like I said earlier, the advantage of having the RDA owning that property is we can do a lot more with that than the city could if it was selling it.
And if if we decided not to use as much property for the Veterans Memorial, that could go into that as well. So if we could get that breakdown of how much more property could be available.
I'd have to take a look and see what's there.
More in-depth.
Yeah, all I did is just calculate the property that's currently owned by the redevelopment agency.
Okay.
You know, and if you look at it, I think it could be a pretty cool development over there. I mean, I think it could be an advantage to the cultural center. I think it could be an asset to I think it could be an asset to the Veterans Memorial as opposed to a distraction from
Right.
the Veterans Memorial. You've got, you know,
Rec center.
you've got the rec center, the county owns, Salt Lake County owns all of the land adjacent to it with the
East.
to the north and east as it bends along the river as part of their Jordan River Parkway Preservation Project. That's never going to get developed. So you've got some built-in open space, you've got the trail, you've got the river, be
Have the
what it is.
River launch with all abilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think
That's a lot of
it
stuff.
could be really cool over there. I think it could be a really neat development.
In favor of inquiring or
Yeah.
launching an RFP as well, and
Okay.
not burdening the citizenry, on this. Not their fault either.
With a 12%, yeah.
Sure.
If we could take that off
And
a
we're
little bit
citizens.
less.
Just try and take some notes, is that their direction?
I think so. Does anybody have
Anybody
opposed
against
to
I
putting
don't
on
know if I'm
RFP?
opposed or not. I'm a little concerned. We're fixing, a 15-year problem with a property that's gonna be there for 100 years. And is this really what we want at the entrance of our city next to the river? For the next 100 years?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think we should be careful, but asking for an RFP and considering it, that gives us time to see what options will come to us and maybe we get those and decide, no, we don't want any of this.
Yeah.
Correct.
And then we can look at other options. And we have enough in the fund balance that we don't have to fix this in the next 6 months.
It's just getting more information.
Exactly.
That's really all it is right now.
I just want us to keep that in mind, though,
Right.
I was really hoping for open space there. I think that would benefit our residents for 100 years and longer. And I'm not sure that multifamily is really going to be best in the long run.
Right.
Well, one thing thank you, Lars. One thing I agree with Lars is about the entrance, the gateway go to our city, that's right there from the east side to the west side. I really don't know about, we should put that density or commercial in that area, to be honest with you. I probably erase all the items and all the options here. I'm not gonna, so I have two options I'm gonna do just like you guys doing right now. Sell that land or the Maverick Center, that two things to pay the debt. But again, like at the entrance, I don't know how to do that. It is for 50 years from now. And we have the problem, a lot of police officers in that area are at the front of the entrance from the east side to the west side, and we just not far from our city, city hall right here, not far from that, and kind of like, should we put a commercial there better, or I don't know, to be honest with you,
Another concern is the proximity to the homeless shelter across the river.
Right.
And I don't know what would be best
But I'm thinking
in that property.
But I don't think lots, I don't think we keep that for open space, because we are in big trouble.
So what was the plan to be able to pay for it? I mean, within the last 3 years, there was definitely, you could see it wasn't going to be able to make the payments. So what was the talk
Well, the plan was hopefully that there would, I mean, it's based on the projections. The increment rule has changed recently. It was coming up. There wasn't a plan to come up with the additional money other than to, let's talk to the council and find out, what we can do. So yeah, we didn't have anything other than what we had right here. And a lot of these are new ideas that we've come up with based on current information. And I think it's been very helpful to have Mr. Springmeyer's an expert in this area, has been for a lot of years. And he's been very good to work with. So,
Thank you, Jim.
you know,
I think I'm fine with exploring the sale of the property. I just have heartburn with what the implications would be on the city center SAR funding, redesignating that, and I just don't know what type of implications that could have on the development.
One's a bitter pill. I mean, there's just no ways to select that one. That one's a bitter pill. It's rough either way. Because it's a lot of money that's gonna be coming into SAR for 10 years, starting in 2027.
Into the city center.
In city center, that would go directly towards the cultural center debt. But we lose any ability to have a meaningful, other than through our normal, zoning and regulation and planning processes, to have any real influence or participation in the redevelopment there. So that's a tough one.
Yeah.
We've gone back and forth on that within my own office for a couple of years.
Because even if they were looking at future getting rid of SARS so they could start another one increment process to bring in more money.
I'm sorry, say that again, ma'am.
So on one of the projections, I thought you said that the past RDA people were thinking about getting rid of the city centers SAR and actually creating a new.
Yes.
RDA.
Yeah, that was, we ran the two scenarios so that you saw what the shortfall looks like with city center SAR and versus what it looks like without city center SAR.
So the new area, maybe I'm stating this over and over again, but the new area generates new revenue that would go to new development, but takes the revenue that's going for debt service away.
Yeah.
And the SAR is what's paying the debt service, what's
Yes.
obligated to the debt
Correct.
service. And the new money wouldn't be obligated and maybe couldn't be used for debt service.
Correct. It could not be used for it unless, except for that portion on Market Street, on the marketplace property, if that included the cultural center.
Yes, if we created a new project area, and that's part of the multiple pieces on this. If we sold the land to be developed, then it would be in our best interest to create a project over there, which would solve two problems. One, it would have an independent source of revenue that could be used for the cultural center. And secondly, the cultural center would now be in a redevelopment project area that could be loaned money from other project areas, as opposed to now where it would have to meet the direct benefit provision.
And if we so the intent was to get rid of city center, have new increment for the new development. But that was gonna cost us the debt service money coming in.
Yes.
Because none of that can be paid on debt service. Okay, I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are the two options. I wouldn't say
Right.
that was a plan necessarily, but those are the two weighted options.
Yeah, but that's dedicated to the debt service where the new increment wouldn't be.
Correct.
Yeah. so-
Wouldn't preclude us from using it for debt service if the cultural center was in a project area,
In a project.
in a
It
project
doesn't
area.
have to be in city center.
We could
project
loan
area.
from one to the other, especially one that's now got a revenue source. We could loan from one to the other.
And you could create an area around the cultural center.
Yes, we could create an area around the cultural center. It would operate like the Maverick Center does and have no potential for revenue, only receiving of loan funds. But then we're into the same problem with the Maverick Center where we're loaning money to a 5-year-old knowing that they have no ability to ever repay that loan, right?
Yeah, how wise is that?
Yeah. Well, they're
Well,
only
we
5 years.
could difficulty with convincing the other taxing entities
With City Center?
with creating an RDA That includes the cultural.
I think the cultural center is an easier sell.
Really?
Yeah, I do. And I think we might be able to work out some things with the county and the school district on, you know, on maybe some cross-use participation of those facilities. You know, I think that's an easier sell, and frankly, we're not talking about their participation in the other taxing entities. Their participation wouldn't be quite as, it's not massive. We're not asking them for, this isn't you know, the Northwest EDA where their participation is great just based on the size of the numbers. The benefit also wouldn't be as great to them. But if it were county wants all housing all the time, everywhere and anywhere. So if it were a housing development, I think we could sell that to them easier. School district's a little bit tougher nut when it comes to housing, and it's more about what the current enrollment projections look like in the schools within that area. Do they need it, or is that going to be a burden to them? So that's a little bit different one.
Well, I would not encourage giving away usage at the cultural center as part of the deal,
I would,
just because.
I wouldn't say giving
county-
away. I would never
Well,
give away. Yeah,
Yeah, if we're compensating at all, because that thing needs to turn into a profit-making,
100%.
we need to put
Yes,
somebody over there.
And
that
I didn't mean to
understands how
imply
work
that
it.
we,
Yeah.
we package and give away time. But I would love for the school district in the county to be using the cultural center. I would love for
Their use.
anybody to be paying for their use at the cultural center. So
Because we definitely need to turn
that was
that into a profit,
100.
like the Maverick Center has.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think could be some plans with that we can eventually bring back to
Yeah.
you all about how that could be reshaped, reformed to do what you just said.
okay. So I think taking a year isn't a bad idea to look at selling what it would cost, look at reprogramming the cultural center and see if it can start making a profit. Probably not enough to pay the bill, but enough to at least be paying for itself. And starting.
Reading the scenarios.
Did you want the RFP?
Yeah, so do you?
Move
is everybody
forward
good
on
with
an
moving forward
RFP?
With just the RFP to see if there's interest, and then looking at reprogramming and see where we can get things to be more profitable.
If you,
Done.
yes, we
Okay.
can do that. I know we've thrown a lot out here and if you're not ready to move forward, we don't have to, but I know we've got a lot of other things to discuss.
Yeah,
So I think we've given you plenty to think about. We're happy to answer more questions, move the discussion further. If you have questions right now you need answered so that you have enough to think about, we're happy to do that, but I think we could probably spend 3 days on the discussion as well, so.
Yes.
We can just on a regular cadence for a study meeting or communication.
We can always do that.
Yeah.
Yep,
Just a bit top of mind.
yep.
let us know how it's going.
Anything
then-
else on it right now?
So who's the RDA director? I mean, who's the RDA, sorry, not director, person on the
Chair.
council that's the chair? Does anybody remember? Is it you?
Yes.
Because I would like to see the council member attend your RDA so they understand what's going on.
Attend my RDA.
Whatever RDA plan
Meeting.
meetings you have,
We can do that.
Understood? Sure.
you know what I mean? I mean, that was for future in the to
Housing Authority.
housing and
Sure.
building and everybody to have the council member that's actually the chair or the vice chair if the chair can't show up to be there. So that,
We got a few extra offices these days. that we
yeah,
can-
and then there's no,
Yeah.
then they can keep us up to date and there's no holes in the information being transferred.
And they've been great on providing those updates and heads up prior to like our RDA special meetings and
Right.
things like that. But you're asking for a little more proactive.
Well, because we go into those meetings and how many of you really understand the full depth of what you're voting on?
Mhm.
Even as the chair.
Usually all we ever do is vote on the budget.
Yeah. Sometimes there's some agreements brought
things.
forward, but not a ton.
But you're right. It goes from budget and budget, then it's a skyrocketing new project area and a whole lot of new things and yeah. Welcome the opportunity to Bring them in.
So I take a note, we'll, with all the boards. If they're having a meeting, we want whoever's,
Yeah, we can.
that I got to figure out what you're on.
And I can get with you, Jake. We can schedule weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever you want. Update meetings, sit down with staff. We can do, however, you could attend our staff meetings if you want to come to that level. So we can work on that, what will meet your needs.
I used to do a monthly ride along.
Okay.
With the progress and stuff.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Good.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All kinds of fun. Do you have more for us, Jim? Or is that the?
Nope. I'm getting a nod. Nope.
My packet is done.
I got all kinds of things, but I'll only give you what's requested.
We only get 101 today.
Oh, I
500 level.
I think you got into the upper level division today.
And then we're able to cover all of our lease finance
Oh,
outstanding.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
Sorry, last page.
yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't cover that one. I put the leases on there just so that you had them for reference. Most of those are revenue stream dependent. For example, the golf course pays for theirs. The the ambulance service pays for the fire trucks because they roll on ambulance services. They're pretty well, they're all covered.
Okay.
Yeah.
They all have their own.
And they're quite
records.
small considering what the bonded debt is
And their interest rates are decent.
so far. Market
No more
driven.
refinancing until they go down, right?
Yeah, I hope that we see them drop a little bit. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, do we want to hit another subject or I don't know what everybody's lunch schedule, meeting things are. It's itty bitty.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah.
Luckily, it's on here too.
Yeah.
But I can still put notes.
Right, Brendan.
So what is do you want to do another one, another subject?
Sure.
And then we can eat 12:30 or 1?
It really depends on
Jake,
Jake too.
how's
Who's got it
Jake's
ready
status?
now.
They're ready if you'd rather break now and not get into something else,
You.
up to
I'll
you.
look the rest of you.
They're ready, you should eat.
Okay,
The next one looks like it's program loss, so that might
Yes, so we can get into.
We can get into those.
go a while.
those might, yes,
That
quite a
might
while.
go a little longer.
And then we've
Yeah.
also got some. Eric's got some items to
Eric's
bring
got some
up.
stuff.
Yeah, the things
Okay.
that,
If you want to break from budget, we could let Eric go right after lunch and then
And then
get
come
back
back to
into
this.
program mods. It's up to you.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay. I'm good with either way.
What time do we plan to be ready to go?
Well, see, it's greenhouse season, so I eat fast. So I can ready at 12 o'clock, but so 12:15,
Good.
And after?
Bring my plate in here.
yeah, then after, so yeah. It's true too. Yeah, unless everybody's like, we're bored. Let's start at 10,
Yeah.
12:05.
Okay, all right.
Sounds
Whatever you
great.
want. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, quick.
Oh, it's just to stay alive. It's not as much of an enjoyment this time of year. We literally have to tell ourselves to slow down after the busy season. It's like you do not